All right, all of you wonderful freedom-loving men and women, this is Mark, Mission Critical Podcast. If you are watching or listening to this podcast, remember, you are, in all honesty, you are part of the resistance. And that resistance might seem futile, but if we don't start speaking out and having adult, cogent, conversations about the world going, the events that are going on around in the world around us, then it probably is already too late. So, again, I'm Mark, one of your hosts. Your other host is, well, I guess he's over on that side. Yep, there he is.
Redbeard,
the infamous Redbeard. And we've got two special guests. You may have seen them from the last episode. If you want to get more of their background and stuff, go see the previous episode. But Paul and Blackbeard, why don't you say hi to everybody real quickly?
How's it going?
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Paul, you want to show everybody that shiny dome of yours? Boom! Look at that. All right, avert your gaze. That is not a sunspot. That is just another nice shiny melon right there. Hey, all right. So here we go. We're jumping into episode 20, and the title of today's episode is "The Man Behind the Curtain." Well, the real question is, who is behind the curtain? And what we mean by that is, so we talked about UFOs last week, and and both Blackbeard and Paul were here for that. But that kind of just led into another conversation when we did our after action review from that episode. And it really isn't just necessarily UFOs. I mean, start thinking about all the other events that have been taking place, in modern history. Let's take it all the way back to like maybe the 60s to, the current era right now. And if you just look at all the different types of events that have taken place, well, actually, you can go farther back. Look at Nikola Tesla. All right. Like, hey, where's all of his paperwork, his notes, his experiments, everything he was working on, that suddenly disappeared. An individual develops a car that runs off of water, and then you don't hear anything more about him or the technology or 0 point or anti-grav or et cetera, et cetera. So the real question is, what's really going on here? Is the government keeping this stuff secret for some reason? Like, hey, we don't want everybody to know this because that might actually make everyone's lives better, or that has a direct impact on ExxonMobil or OPEC or something. Who's really pulling the strings behind so many of these events? And so this isn't going to be necessarily just one subject. We already did in our pregame. We were already talking about 6 other, just very interesting ways this conversation could go. So we're just going to kind of jump into it from that premise. Who's the man behind the curtain? And can we pull the curtain back and see if he does or does not have any clothes on, or who's really pulling the strings? Who's the puppet master, going on here? And then the last little thing I'll say before we segue into it, and I'll just start off on current events and let everybody kind of just chime in, and we'll just start going in one of these directions because everybody here has a slightly different story they want to tell regarding this subject. I'll just start it off with, again, if you're watching this and if you've watched any of our other episodes, you might say, oh, Mark, you guys are just tinfoil hat, crazy conspiracy theorists. I'm like, it's not me. I mean, FBI Director Wray just got busted. I mean, the information is out again of just yet another example of the FBI lying to the American people, going outside of their jurisdiction and working with civilian entities. Many of them have, are, I don't really like saying left or right leaning because I don't really know what that means. What right leaning, is that necessarily the side that leans towards good? I guess that's how we traditionally use that word. But, I'll just say, if you lean communist, I guess I'm going to say that you're left leaning. But, the FBI working with social media and left leaning organizations to discredit Americans, to target Americans, to lie to Congress about what it is that they're really trying to do. So the man behind the curtain. Well, clearly somebody's behind the curtain within our judicial system and our law enforcement bodies, the judiciary and our law enforcement bodies. I mean, hell, look here, guys, I'll just start off with this. Who's behind the scenes? Do you really think that there's the FBI and Wray yet again being shown to have lied, but then you've got that judge out in DC who's basically saying that Trump is a flight risk. Did you guys see that story too? So who's really pulling the strings here? Is there a judge worth his or her salt who really is a judge who's legitimately authorized to be in that chair because not of their skin color or the fact that because they actually do a good job? They're honest, they're fair, they know the law, they know the Constitution. What judge in the world would really think Donald Trump is a flight risk. So who's really the man behind the curtain here? What's really going on? Maybe we'll just start it there, and then we can kind of go into the spooky and other directions that we've already talked about. Who wants to kind of respond to that? Why would a judge declare that Trump is a flight risk? Nobody? Nobody wants to jump in and take that? Oh, Paul, there you go.
So, I mean, he has the means, and that's really the only reason that I would think. But I don't think he wants to go anywhere.
Okay, well, hang on. The means, well, everybody has the means. I mean, if you have 2 feet, you have the means, right? It's you've got to actually prove or say that there's more extenuating circumstances, like he's so obviously guilty, or we've got, indicators, and he's got property, and capabilities. Yeah, Trump has the means to go anywhere. But the point I'm throwing on this, and maybe I should have led with this, Trump, as a former president, has a Secret Service detail. Do you think Trump is going to flee the country and take all his secrets? I mean, you see how ludicrous this already sounds to me?
Well, the reason it sounds ludicrous, in my opinion, is because all the world is a stage. I mean, he's literally an actor. He's in the Screen Actors Guild.
Well, yeah, I suppose he's done a bunch of that WWE and movies and things of that nature. So, yeah. But I know you mean a little bit more about him being an actor. You want to kind of elaborate on that? I know where you're going with that, but let's continue.
I think that focusing on that level of what's happening is fun in a kind of political sport, in the way that people like watching football, and that I know the outcomes can be more serious and the system takes it very seriously. But I think that ultimately what's behind the curtain is something far older, far more pervasive, and frankly unconventional than people expect. Is to, like, are there any good judges? I'm sure it's the judges that generate controversy that are going to be in the news, because that's what gets people to talk about it, just like we're doing now.
Oh, I had myself on me. I mean, I think everybody would agree with that. I mean, again, when it comes to media and social media, sensationalism is what sells. I mean, like, just even how many people have YouTube channels, then they intentionally talk some shit, or they get into an argument with some other, content creator or some other company, just simply to generate, clickbait and that whole YouTube. I mean, YouTube even encourages and rewards that type of behavior. So I don't think anyone would disagree with you on that sense right there. But, but it really begs the question. I mean, like, who's really behind the curtain? Is this just a group of individuals who just at the individual cellular level, if you want to consider it that, just hate Trump so much that, like, as a judge, you would really, okay. And again, I want to bring Paul back to this. You really think Trump would just, abscond? He's a flight risk. He's not going to show up to court. It's pretty evident by Trump's own statements. He wants to go to court. I mean, I don't see how this guy's a flight risk. Again, he would have to slip his Secret Service detail, and he's a former president. So it's not like he's got one guy with him. He has a detail, right?
Hey,
and go ahead.
I just want to correct myself. Trump should be in the Screen Actors Guild, as I recall, because he was in Union Productions, but I believe he actually turned that down. So, well, I just want to correct that.
Well, but your point is well. I mean, I think we all knew what you're saying. I mean, it's like, yeah, the guy, he's been on TV shows, the wrestling thing, the whole 9 yards. So, at that point, yeah. I mean, again, it is
but so was Reagan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Before he became president. So, I don't think that necessarily by itself is, a limiting factor, but I don't want to maybe necessarily, bog us down too much with just like the current things. So again, FBI Director Wray, and the FBI writ large just being found out again yet to have lied, like, oh no, we weren't targeting, Christians, or Catholics who attend Latin Mass. That was just a rogue, one rogue field office. Now we find out that it's at least 3 field offices that were coordinating this amongst themselves and with other organizations. So, okay, yet again, lying to us, and no, there's no recourse there. I mean, correction. There's no ramification for lying to the American people. No one is being punished. But, now people are saying, the reason the indictment against Trump is because, they said they're trying to pretend that they know what he was actually thinking. And by being able to do that, they're then saying, well, no, he wasn't really thinking that. He was really thinking this. And then therefore, to what you're saying, he's actually lying right now. And then da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's a total inversion of like what seems to be common sense. But I think what's interesting maybe to start with those, and now let's kind of break it out into some of the areas that I know you guys want to touch on, is it just shows that clearly something else is going on here. Yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe it is, thousands of people and positions of, high positions of power to, like, and then to middle to senior ranks within the bureaucracies, and even low level or low ranking people, like GS9s and stuff within the government bureaucracies. But there's just so many people. I mean, and there was another report again about voter fraud. And I know no one wants to talk about that, and everybody says no, there was no voter fraud. And my only comment to that is, you're going to try to tell me that Uncle Joey got more votes than any president in history, to include the left's, poster child, Barack Obama. I'm just going to call bullshit on that,
Yeah.
So who's really pulling the strings here? Now, again, I'm getting a little too political, because that's kind of where I want to take it, because of just the things I'm seeing recently, again, and look at our last decompression video. There's so much more to add just within 2 weeks since then. I mean, and we're not wrong here. I mean, I think Jeremy and I have a pretty good batting average going right now for what we're talking about and what we're saying. So, but I know you guys have some more interesting areas to take that in. Why don't we start with Redbeard, and you can get everybody's juices going, because you wanted to talk about Tesla a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm kind of a Tesla fanboy, but I'm also, I think what intrigues me as it pertains to somebody like Tesla is the fact that there are other Teslas out there. And what I mean by that is, Nikola Tesla was a person who truly was innovative. He was a very intelligent person. He came up with numerous breakthroughs during the time that he had actually worked alongside Thomas Edison. Unfortunately, as time went on, those who've studied the relationship between Tesla and Edison, Edison slowly but surely started to procure some of Tesla's designs, basically stamp his name on it. And we see this not only in the corporate setting, but what invariably ends up happening is, usually with that corporate setting and with an ever-growing corporate greed, you start to find that there is this mishmash of corporatism in government, because eventually it gets to a point where the government's like, this is too good to not look at. And I guess where I'm going with this is, in the end of the day, like, any person that truly has any type of innovation that really is going to benefit society or benefit the average person is usually they're usually defamed. They're usually targeted with PR attacks and stuff like that, or their life is completely put in shambles, whether fiscally or otherwise, whether it's professionally or personally even, or you have these people that end up either imprisoned or dead. And I think it's kind of alarming, because when you look at, especially as it pertains to Tesla, like, Tesla's model for the power grid really was considered the way to go. It would have been super efficient. It was considered probably the most efficient of the two options between Tesla and Edison, and it would have been able to sustain enough power to have very little to no cost to the consumer in the end of the day. And we see stuff like this pop up with, Mark, and you mentioned water powered vehicles and so many other areas that private individuals come up with, and invariably who ends up coming to the door? It's always this government agency that's like, oh, you can't be doing this, you're not smart enough, is usually one of their arguments, is you don't know what you're doing. It's like, well, clearly they do. If they were able to, if they weren't, you wouldn't be at their door.
That's right. Actually. But the other one, just to don't forget, is it's a matter of national security.
Yeah, it's you. How dare you have an at-home Tesla coil, which there have been several people that have done it, as well as reactors. By the way, people have done small nuclear reactors, and I don't know where they get the materials from. I'm never going to say I know that, because I actually don't freaking know. But in the end of the day, like, look, these people have found a way to circumvent their dependency on government, and ultimately that's what government doesn't like. And so they will defame you in whatever way possible. So I'm going to leave it kind of at that, because I know there's a lot you guys can expound upon. So,
well, we might be having a little bit of a delay. Paul, you caught up with us now?
You and Redbeard disappeared, so I don't know if that's me. And Redbeard paused.
Well, so on my side where we're recording, we're good. Everybody's been there the whole time. No interruptions so far. Our NSA handler hasn't fucked with us so far this episode, so we're pretty good.
Well, he needs to fix the feed.
Well, yeah, he does. There's plenty of things he needs to fix. All right, let's roll it over to Paul now that we got you. So, again, did you hear everything he was saying about, and again, Tesla, Edison, those competitions, where did the material go? And not just, with Tesla, but also with other inventors.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that when in my area of work, I look back to when Bill Gates and Steve Jobs basically ripped off Xerox for their operating system. And, they continue to rip each other off back and forth now at this point. I think that Microsoft is starting to move in the direction of the Mac OS. But, you have to wonder what kind of original ideas are out there anymore. I'm just... I don't know. That's similar to, somebody else stealing someone's stuff and taking credit and becoming a billionaire, 2 billionaires. I don't know. There's a lot of that going on, especially in the digital field. And with AI, it's going to get worse.
Well, okay. So, so that's kind of industrial espionage. I'm not saying that's what you're alluding to, but, that's at that type of level. And again, I think when you really think, the man behind the curtain, Jobs and Gates and, Musk and all these guys, they're pretty much in front of the curtain. Right. And, and if you, and I'm not saying any of those people are evil, but when you start thinking of like groups or individuals that many humans on the planet have a negative association with, they associate negatively again. So like, whether it's Bilderberg, whether, why can't I think of his name all the time? Come on, Soros, or the guy who looks exactly like an evil. I mean, he's straight out of like some type of like, evil. Not Soros. Who's the other guy? Why am I drawing a blank on his name all of a sudden? Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab just comes across like as a straight up evil, evil villain from a movie. I still think those are still just like, that's not really even the man behind the curtain yet at this point in time. I think those are, maybe they're the Praetorian Guard, or they're the main lieutenant that's out there that's being, exposed to us. But even on their own things, I mean, if you look at, there's some stuff that just came out about Soros, but it's actually really old news. I mean, these individuals are, again, just like we did in the pregame, they are just straight up admitting what they're doing. They're not hiding anything. This is who we are. This is what we're trying to do. So who's behind that, Blackbeard? Is there somebody behind that? Or is it just, no, it's just, eccentric, multi-billionaires just who think that they're, and at that level, your ego and your, everything else is so skewed in one direction that you don't even know what reality is. What do you think's going on here, brother, man?
Well, I'm sure there's some of that, that's just human psychology. When you have every material desire that you could ever want, what's left for you? You have to aim to a higher level of self-actualization than just wealth. And so how do I exercise that wealth toward my goals? And then you have to ask, well, where do the goals come from? And my personal view, after looking at it for a number of years, is that all of it comes down to a devotion to various versions of a hidden religion that give people purpose and meaning. That's what I think is ultimately at work, at least at that level.
Do you care to just go into that just a little bit more? What do you mean by that? I mean, are you implying that, the man behind the curtain is still a man, but it's a consortium, it's groups again. So when you think about Davos and Bilderberg, it's like, again, is that the front still? And there's even more behind that. We have no idea what it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are the NGOs, and they have power over governments, but a lot of them were set up by like occultists. Like, for example, the Lucis Trust, it didn't create the UN, but the land for that was donated by the Rockefellers. But the idea of a united world is a very old dream of this hidden religion. And so everything is ultimately an ends to bring that about.
Now, Paul, what Blackbeard was just saying. So I don't know if this quite ties into what you were kind of getting at, and then also Blackbeard, something you said. So I really kind of agree with that. I think that, at some level, wealth is almost meaningless. I mean, I personally believe behind the scenes, the real man behind the curtain, so to speak, like money, like you've moved past wealth. And then to your point, Blackbeard, it actually really is like, no, I am going to shape the world. I am going to make a one world government. I am going to get everybody onto my sheet of music, or they'll, die, or we'll kill them off, or, they can just, eat bugs. I think that's what we're seeing on the front side of the curtain. And I think some of the, the lesser demons, or the junior lieutenants, however you want to say it, I mean, again, I'm not saying this, I'm not making it up. I mean, there's a ton of them, everything from British royalty to, multi-millionaire, billionaire, Americans who are talking about, hey, we need population control. We need to, we need to influence the weather. We need to do all these other things. So, I mean, there they are saying what, what the agenda is. And Redbeard, I don't know if this is kind of your you're down your lane, but I'm thinking that whole, Agenda 23 and, and then the whole replacement theory kind of concepts, and mainstream media is like, oh, that doesn't exist. That's big lie. And yet here's all these books, they're like, no, Agenda, and I mean, it's like, no, how is it? So just because you say it's a lie, but I'm looking at the documentary and here they are saying it themselves, that doesn't, but that's where we are. And I guess I'm kind of tying that in a little bit to what Blackbeard and kind of what Paul's saying. You've got media and other, like in front of the curtain mechanisms, control measures, or, mediums, again, a way of controlling media, that are actually just out there. And even when faced with all the objective truth in the world, and again, Corona is another one of them. To this day, you've got, CDC personnel and talking head media who just won't even admit anything. And so anyway, I kind of gave us a little bit more to chew on there, Redbeard, but I kind of wanted to get back into that, again, who's really behind the curtains, and even the senior people in front of the curtain, they're not hiding it. They're just openly talking about it.
So, and this will kind of feed into that, but I really want to hear what each of you have to say about this, but I'm going to kind of go down the road of somewhat of a conspiratorial, I guess, type thing. But is the tone that we're talking about in this conversation, like, it makes me wonder, especially given recent events and as it pertains to Europe and in the war that's going on in Ukraine, I do find it interesting how you're seeing the West, and I use the West in particular because I really do feel like they are kind of, to a certain degree, like the leading tip of the spear on a lot of this stuff, right? In you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I want to explore this. But do you think that there is, to some degree, a hatred for perhaps a country like Russia, because Russia is separating itself from the rest of the world? They are basically centralizing in consolidating the resources for themselves. They've established their own banking system. They have made their own independent agreements. You're looking to see, like, Russia has been pulling nations that otherwise would have been dealing with the West like in Africa. And these nations are starting to realize, like, look, like, we have been in this perpetual cycle of chaos ever since we got invested with this. And what Russia's doing is different. Now, I know how that might sound to some people. I get it, but in the end of the day, like, if you look at the examination of how hard they're trying to really overwhelmingly paint Russia, an adversary to many for so long, but they're really pushing it pretty hard. Do you think that to some degree, and I don't know, that because Russia is trying to just exist, and they emphasize their existence as a people, right? Not as a country. They like it's been said numerous times, a world without Russia is no world to live in at all. And they're emphasizing like we want to exist as a people, whether that be diplomatically and peaceful, or we will fight for our existence. Well, you have the West that's unified in this singular idea that they assume is like the best way of doing things. I don't know. Like, do you think that that factors into it? Do you think there's something there? What do you guys think? I mean, it's just something I was thinking about listening to this conversation, because look, they are the ones that realistically want no part of this unipolar Western idea of a world, and that in and of itself makes them a threat to the West, right? I don't know. Like it's
Paul or Blackbeard, who wants to take that one first?
Well, I think that I'd like to, and I can't address exactly what you said, but to go around a little bit, a lot of the cyber attacks, right? Those are being, is it an individual doing something? Yeah. Is it a distributed network of individuals, or is it a nation state? Considering Russia's heavily involved in that area, I do believe that they are part of coordinated attacks like that. Do they have individuals there as well? Most likely. I mean, I can't speak for any of it, but we know that that is there. So are they behind the curtain for all of this stuff? If you remember years ago with the hacking group Anonymous, they still don't know where it started or who started it. They've arrested individuals that were doing that. Now, they did have, radical leaning attacks for the most part. So we kind of know where they go there, which would, again, take me away from Russia, because like you said, Russia, they want to reunite the Soviet Union, and they don't want anything to do with, this woke stuff that's going on, or any kind of, that anything global. They want to be by themselves, and they, together. So I do agree with you on that. And I think that they're definitely, and yeah, they might be behind the curtain on some of these attacks, but they definitely, in my honest opinion, attacking the DNC server, that's just like the 51 people that, confirmed that Hunter Biden's laptop was not legitimate and it was Russian disinformation. It's all the same stuff. So I agree with you about Russia.
I just want to throw this out there, and because I know Blackbeard might pick this ball up and run it, across the, the first down marker. See, I couldn't even remember my football analogies. I haven't watched football in so long, but you guys are kind of talking about, Russia, you're kind of getting into, this bipolar bifurcation, type of thought. My brain, as you guys were both talking, I was like, well, what, that still doesn't rule out that it could be one group of people. Like if there's a group of people who are really behind the curtain, because look, it's beneficial to play both sides off against each other, and you never tip your hat. It seems like you're supporting these guys, but it seems like you're supporting these guys, so it's really, then it becomes hard to pinpoint. And at the end of the day, you may not care whether Russia wins and prevails or United States wins and prevails, because you really are the one who's the puppet master pulling the strings from, behind the curtain again. So, and I want to bring this over to Blackbeard, because that also makes me think of my other comment, because at that point, you're so powerful. I mean, it isn't about wealth. I mean, what is money to you at that point? It's actually about changing outcomes on a global, a regional or global level. So Blackbeard.
Well, I have to agree with that. There's so many different levels to all these things. So like if we get sent off to war, we're fighting other people who are, in that sense, like we're at war. These are our enemies. We're in opposition, right? But then at a higher level that you get up there, for example, Prescott Bush was indicted for his role in the Union Banking Corporation and funding the rise of the Third Reich. At the same time, other Wall Street banks were funding the Soviet Union. So, and those are, the two, the thesis and antithesis of one another. And so that's an opportunity both for profitability, certainly, but you have to remember that these banks, to a lesser extent then, because we hadn't gone to purely floating currencies, that happened in 1971, and an event called the Nixon shock. So subsequent to that, they literally create money from nothing. And so when you have access to that, it's called the Cantillon effect. The closer you are to the spigot of money creation, the greater your advantage before it has a chance to basically saturate the market and reduce the purchasing power of any $1. That's a little bit of a tangent, but all that to say is that when you can create money from nothing, you have all the money in the world. So the question is, what do I use this power for? And it's a religion that says, you know, in God we trust. On our money, it doesn't say what God, but trust is faith. So the whole thing is made real by our belief in it. So it's like it's a magic trick in a lot of ways. But anyway, so that to say, you have them funding to opposite sides, because you can also change. I think somebody says something to the effect of more in a week of war than in 10 years of peacetime. There's something to that effect, turn of phrase that's used a lot. So I think, you know, ultimately it depends on what level you are in the hierarchy of the world, how you're going to look at it. On one level, it's like, well, Russia's the enemy, or Ukraine's the ally, or, you know, Iraq's the enemy, and all that. But on a higher level, there's people operating the chessboard that that are using this to their advantage. And I think that they understand a principle, which is from physics, which is to say that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so if I'm going to go institute some kind of whatever foreign policy objective, it could be something, a cultural revolution, any number of things. You know that the minute you do something, the opposition will mount. It will create. And so what you do is, so that you have control, is you create your own opposition, and then whatever happens, you win.
Yep. And that's kind of, and I'm glad you just said that, because that's what I was alluding to earlier, is like, you're just kind of playing both sides. And as you and Paul were both talking, I don't know why, but I was just thinking about the Napoleonic era, you know, and the whole international banking, the Rothschilds. I mean, they were making, it didn't matter, and they were creating this environment, you know, and profiteering off of that whole thing, you know. And so again, you just look, it's fair. I get to ask a question. So kind of, if you think about that sense, and I'm, you know, again, there's people behind the curtain. We're just, you know, held, the four of us, we don't even equal a pawn. You know, a pawn would be like a, you know, a really poor, you know, nation maybe, you know, but they're maneuvering pieces on the chessboard. And, you know, does it matter if it's, you know, a Russo-Sino alliance that wins, or does it matter if it's the West, you know, the NATO or American hegemony, you know, does it really matter? I mean, because, or maybe you're just playing around to see, hey, let's just try something else. You know, we've been using the dollar and we've created the Fed Reserve, and I've kind of thrown it out there because hopefully somebody will take the bait on that, and we'll bring that up here, you know, who's behind the scenes. But so, you know, the Fed Reserve off the gold standard, do this. And like, okay, we've done this for a little while. Now let's kind of introduce a little chaos to see what the outcome's going to be. Now, whether that's an independent Russia, you know, or if it's a new bipolar world, or if we go into a unipolar world and America slips down. I mean, again, going back to BRICS and trying to devalue our currency, you know, Blackbeard, you've already alluded to some of this stuff. So I kind of want to throw that maybe out there as a little bit. It's like, yeah, maybe the end game, you know, again, well, and then now I just thought about this, and you look at the lesser imps, or the junior lieutenants who are out there on the world stage talking about, you know, we need to block out the sun, and, you know, and no one should be eating meat because cows, you know, this animal that's been around, you know, since before man or whatever, is suddenly just now harming the world, you know, like, so no one gets to eat meat. Everyone eats cricket. So again, is there money in that? I mean, well, so now I'm kind of rambling, but I'm kind of talking out loud. Look at all the information that's starting to come back, you know, in regards to the whole, you know, I know they call it DEI, but I'm just going to call it DIE, you know, diversify, you know, invest, you know, but the companies that have done that, look at how much they've suffered. Right. And so, but do they really care? Because maybe at the end goal, to kind of bring in what we're saying, who's really behind the curtain, because the people really pulling the strings, they don't really care if they lose $200 million, because to Blackbeard's point, because we'll just make more, or that's not really, I've got so much money, $200 million is like the equivalent to 20 bucks or $2 to the rest of us.
Yeah.
Well, and to kind of go off of that real quick, Mark, I was actually listening to the Redacted podcast. I think it was last week or the week before, perhaps. And there's another Bitcoin that came out. I think Blackbeard might know what I'm talking about this, and Mark and Paul, you might have heard of it. It just started rolling out, but it was, I think it's called like WorldCoin. I think is what it's called. where
nodding. Yeah.
Yep. So and basically it's like a universal income is how it's kind of marketed, but you do a retinal scan and it deposits a certain amount, and these kiosks are over there. And so Clayton Morris, who him and his wife run the Redacted podcast, he actually went up and talked to these people, and he's like, so what's the deal with this? Like, why do you need my retina? Why do you need this? Why do you need that? And like, when the more he asked questions, like, she didn't even know what she was promoting. She just was simply there to sign people up, and you get 2,000. I think it was like 2,000 or something like that. World coin to start with, and it was something along that line, and I vaguely remember what it was, but it goes into that idea of like globalizing a currency. And when you listen to the interview with the guy who set this up, and he was asked questions, he was being very like vague in how he answered his questions, and I think it's interesting because a lot of people, if you would ask people about this 5 years ago, they'd been like, no, there's no way that's going to become a thing. Well, it's here. It's here now. And if you take that and you go off of the social credit system, realistically, all of these different things are starting to come to a head in various ways. And so that in and of itself is just another mechanism for control. Now, what I think is going to be interesting is how is the underground markets or dare I say black markets going to develop when you have segments of populations that are like, nope, I'm not going to be involved in this. I will live in squalor, but I will live free. To some degree, you're going to have a bastion of resistance. So I'm interested to see how that's going to unfold. So I'll leave it to you guys, but I wanted to bring that up.
All right. One of you guys, who wants to go next? Blackbeard, Paul?
Well, I think that, yeah, along those lines, one of the things that I advise anyone that, for security purposes is don't use the facial recognition.
Yeah.
I know it's convenient, but, if your password is compromised, and I may have brought this up in the past, but if you lose your password, you can change that. You can't change your face. And then when you're getting into retinal scans, now you're getting more identifiable.
Yep.
To have that given to a global group or an unknown group, who the heck are they? I mean, I'm still wondering what happened with, as much as I like him, what happened with Rand Paul and checking out for where the gold was. He was doing that over a decade ago, and then he gave that up. Why?
Yeah.
So I just got to tell a quick little personal story. This is a long time ago. This is 2023. This is probably 2014, 2015. And I'm buying a nice watch, not a Rolex. I've never had the money for a Rolex, but I was buying a nice watch, and I'm in this really nice, store, and I needed a nice watch because, you really can't wear a watch like this, with a dress suit when you're trying to pretend that you're like, some senior diplomat or somebody who you're really not, right? Because I can't show up like this when I'm doing some of that spooky shit.
Gotta wear that Hugo Boss.
Well, we've had that conversation. Yep, that's right. But no, so I'm buying this watch, and Paul, to your point, they wanted to fingerprint me as part of my purchase. I was like, what? Like, well, yeah, it's just, I'm like, no, you don't need my fingerprint for me to conclude this transaction. Like, well, we got to keep a record. I'm like, where do you keep the record? And they're like, well, you know what? I'm like, is it a skiff? Is it secured? Like, what is your security on this? Like, and I'm like, and now the manager's getting involved. I'm like, look, here's the deal. I'm either spending $1,500 with you guys right now, or I'm not. And if you decide if my fingerprint is worth the $1,500 sale or not, because I'm not giving you any of that freaking bio data. That's just really weird. But started with stupid camera. Started over here with Redbeard. Now it went over to Paul. Let's bring it to Blackbeard. But yeah, that's it. And more people just go along with it. And and that whole, I think they call it the orb, Redbeard. Blackbeard might know more about it. But dude, you see the pictures of people just like zombie getting their retinas scanned and who's collecting that data and what are they doing with it? Blackbeard.
Well, I mean, that's about building the techno utopia. That's, I think, part of the religion, honestly. It's an expression of it, and that goes to technology itself. And I believe, this is just my opinion, but I gave a presentation on this a number of years ago, that essentially humanity is at a point of bifurcation where we have a choice to determine what the direction is for our future. And one of them is a spiritual direction, and the other one is a technological direction. And if you're a materialist, then the only salvation that you have is your own intellect. And the product of that intellect is represented by the technology that we produce. So they talk about, well, we're going to extend lifespans or live forever, and if you look at like the promises of, the major world religions, you'll see that a lot of them have to do with re-achieving immortality, or at least escaping, the suffering of the world. So the reason that they want to collect that data is because in the absence of God, to have the properties of omniscience requires that you have sufficient data to be able to predict the future and so control the present. It's just like Philip K. Dick's the Minority Report, where it's like, and actually that's brings to mind something called, you look it up, it's called the Sentient World Simulation. Now, I'm sure they've made newer iterations on it since then, but it's essentially a way to virtually war game. If I give any particular input or shock to the system, what are the probable ramifications of that? Because instead of having groups of, really intelligent people just sitting around brainstorming, now they have, the development of artificial intelligence. And so that can act as a kind of predictive framework.
Hey, on that note, so is it possible, in your opinion, that the physical world events that we're seeing that are transpiring around us, is that also part of, again, okay, we've done the simulations, we've done the tabletop exercises, but to what I think where I was going when we brought this up earlier, it's people behind the real people behind the curtains to whom money really isn't an issue. They have so much money. It's really now about moving the pieces, to your point, Blackbeard, to see what happens within the system, to see how the system reacts. Again, it's not really even a concern of, well, whether it's a world dominated by, one political sphere of influence or the other, or one cultural group or the other. It's I'm trying to create conditions and to move it into the most desirable and the most desirable outcome that I can most easily manipulate to my ultimate goals and objectives. Is Blackbeard, does that fit into what you just said there, or is that kind of separate?
Well, there's two kinds of people, really. There are the people who see extreme competence, and then there's people who see gross incompetence. And again, I think it's a matter of what level of the pyramidal structure you operate at. Everything's compartmentalized, everything's on a need-to-know basis. The vast majority of us don't need to know anything. So if I'm working for a major corporation, I haven't the faintest idea what the executive suite is planning. My job is to operate my job, punch in, punch out, and go home. And I think that that's kind of how the world operates. I think that the chaos that we're seeing right now is a natural byproduct of the choices and the directions that leadership has made over decades, in some cases over centuries. But I think that ultimately it is, before something new can enter, if I buy a plot of land that has a house on it, and I don't want that house, I want the land, I don't want the house. Well, I can't just build a new house where the house is. I have to destroy the old house, and then I can build a new house. And so what you talk about the animosity toward Russia and China and the establishment of the BRICS, and that's fair enough, because they appear to be attempting a countervailing monetary system. But look at the West. I mean, are we not completely under attack? And by what is ostensibly our own people? Look at the birth rates in the West. What are they like, right?
Yeah.
And so, I just think that the human race is at war right now with something that is ill-defined for us on a day-to-day basis. And I think that maybe the point of even discussing these kinds of things and learning about them is just insofar as it's able to empower us in our day-to-day decisions and in developing the kind of character and person that we want to become.
Well, and I also these conversations help your day-to-day, and I think it, again, I've got this looking through a soda straw, not my original idea. I don't remember where I heard it, but first time I jumped through it out of an airplane, it was like looking through a soda straw. The more jumps I had, the more experience I had, the more my vision actually started expanding. And I saw that world and experienced that event in a completely different way. So kind of to your point, I think these conversations hopefully at least help, the people watching and listening, start to reflect on your day to day, and maybe you start looking at things a little different. Like, why are we wearing a mask that we all know? Like, I thought we trust the science, but we know, and I'm going to harp on this until the day I die. 2019, I was following this stuff. We knew in early 2020 that none of these masks were going to work, and we knew an N95 wouldn't work. N95 filters out 95% of particulates that I think it's 0.03 microns or larger, right? The corona particulate is and somebody can, I can get fact checked here, whatever, but it's like 0.001, right? So it's a completely different order of magnitude. And Redbeard, I think you and I may have talked about this once when, I had a customer say to me, when I was doing my customer calls for my business side, and he made the reference to, is like, putting on one of those cloth masks or even an N95 is like trying to stop a BB with a tennis net. It's like, you might get one or two BBs, but so to Blackbeard, to your point, obviously, and and the reason I brought that up, because to me, that is all about control. Now, was that a singular effort? I really do think that there's segments of society that they get the marching orders. They like, okay, somebody said something, wink, wink, nod, nod. You don't need to actually physically tell me or order me. I know what I now need to do to continue this narrative. And then that goes kind of into what all three of you have talked about. It's like, I don't want to call it brainwashing, but you're just moving down because at some level you think this is better for whatever it is that's going on. But I think, honestly, I think it's evil. I'll just call it there. I guess that's where I'm ultimately going with it. Part of the who's behind the curtain, I don't see anything that represents, and it doesn't have to be from a religious perspective, but however, you define good. We as a societies and individuals, we actually all have our own morals. I personally don't believe anyone's born with morals. Morals are learned experiences that we get through our personal life experiences and those individuals we interact with. Take a bunch of gang guys from some, inner city, or wherever it is, any criminal type element. They have a completely different set of codes and ethics and morals than quote unquote common society does. So why is it not possible that people at that level with such wealth and influence, where money doesn't even, money ceases to, that money is not even a thing. What is their sets of values and ethics and morals and principles, their guiding star? I don't even know if we can even comprehend that, but whatever that is, it doesn't coincide with my version on my day-to-day. And if we can do things to help open up, and again, go from looking through the soda straw to, full spectrum observation, and assimilation of data, based on, your sensors, your senses. So that's my thought, Blackbeard. That was just a great point. And I'm sorry to have taken that in a weird little direction, but I love that. I think that's actually it. Who really is? I think it's whatever it is. I think it's evil. I don't see the direction we're going. And I know somebody right now that would say, well, that's Mark, because you eat red meat and you're part of the patriarchy and all that kind of bullshit. I'm like, no, because I believe in freedom and I'm a human, and you can have your own opinion, but I don't want to put you into a concentration camp simply because you don't like my style of music or, or the hobbies or whatever the things I'm passionate about. Paul, I saw you kind of smiling back there. What do you got to add to that, sir?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the man behind the curtain, just think about it. When I mentioned Bill Gates earlier, when he first started his foundation, we didn't know what, it seemed like it was a charitable organization. We got a billionaire that's doing this and his wife's helping out. And, when did we first start hearing about George Soros? So what I think has happened is all these people were behind the curtain and now they're emboldened. They don't care. They're right out in front of us and they don't care what we say. Again, the man that is science told us all about those masks. And for somebody to come out like that, he's not hiding behind anything. And he decided to dictate what the entire world is going to do. So I think that the curtain has been pulled down. And unfortunately, they don't care. They want power.
Do you think the curtain's down?
I think it's down.
Fellas.
Okay, wait a minute.
Okay.
For some things, we haven't, for the things we talked about today, yes. We haven't talked about some other things. No.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that's been let down intentionally or if there's been, counterattacks that's, that's, open gaps in their lines, or, well, here, let's come to, Blackbeard and then Redbeard. What do you guys think? So some parts of the curtain we're seeing a little bit, like the curtain waves in the wind, and we see like a foot behind it or whatever it is, whatever your analogy wants to be. Do you think that's happening? If so, why do you think it's happening, Blackbeard?
I think it's happening because it must happen, because as the agenda, as that progresses, there comes a point where it's so overt that hiding no longer remains a possibility. And so at that point, you have to employ a new tactic. It brings to mind the kind of conflicting perspectives on what the future would be between George Orwell, who's a member of the Fabian Society, and he wrote 1984, and then Aldous Huxley. And there's a letter that Huxley wrote to him where he kind of elucidates why he thinks that the future will be one of like persuasion and chemical alteration, and the final revolution would be the revolution of the individual itself, which is what transhumanism, the Internet of Things, and hacking into the human body and all that is ultimately a part of. It's much easier to control people by selling them through convenience and ultimately making the convenience indispensable than it is to overtly use physical force. Now, if you start to lose your persuasive capabilities, if things become too overt, then your only recourse is to resort to more overt forms of direct violent control, which is kind of, I think, why people think it's uncloaking right now. But I really think it's just that we've reached the point of the progression of things where there was just really no way to hide it any longer, and so it isn't.
Yeah. And if I may add something to that too, I was actually going to kind of go into the realm of, when you look at the realm of control, for instance, what is one of the ways that those behind or now revealed behind the curtain like to do this? Well, they like to do a couple things, and it's one. It's, we're going to essentially attack, the individual, or we're going to attack the individual identity, if you will. And then once that has been established, now we're going to get these individuals to fight each other. And then in order to stop the fighting, we're going to strip their identities entirely, unify them under one identity. And then that way they're going to lose their sense of self. They'll become more docile. They're easier to control. They're easier to manipulate in terms of thinking. You can instill like a herd mentality a little bit better. And what I think is interesting is, I think, kind of that cloak or but behind that curtain, I think that curtain's coming down slowly but surely, because we've gotten to a point, at least in some areas to some degree, to the point to where people are starting to realize like, oh, whoa, wait 1 second here. Like I like myself. I like who I am as a person. I like my sense of self, my self identity, and stuff like that. And I'm not talking about the idea of like a woke identity. No, but it's people who are individuals. Individualism is, and being an individual is one of the most powerful concepts, because what it does is it enables you to be free and not dependent on somebody else, more or less a government entity. And it's what they fear, because individuals have the greatest ability to experience liberty, whereas if you herd people together, you can strip them slowly but surely over time. And we've seen decades and decades and decades of conditioning and decades of sowing chaos. One of the most explicit examples of this is racial tensions. You've literally gotten people from different races to overwhelmingly hate each other, people they've never met before, over these synthetic manufactured points of contention. And now slowly but surely you're starting to get people to realize, like, I don't even know why I hate this person. This doesn't even make any sense. And I think that's one of those fractures in curtains that are falling apart, because people are starting to realize these things,
Hey, uh, I'm sure all three of you know 1984 more than I do, but what is that? What was that 2-minute session they had, where they just made everybody
struggle session.
the 2 minute,
Or,
the
2 minutes
Yep.
of hate. 2 minutes
yeah,
of hate.
2 minutes of hate. So that's Redbeard.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
we're living through, like, we're being instructed into the 2 minutes of hate every day, like, and then, and then it's directed at whatever we're told to direct it at, even though we have no idea what the hell that is.
Yep.
Paul, you kind of started this little iteration off, so I think you should maybe you got a chance to kind of respond to Blackbeard and Redbeard, because they kind of took your beginning with that. Again, the question was, is the curtain coming back at all, and what are we seeing? And you started that whole thing. You want to, now that they've had a chance to speak, you want to add more to that, or do you got any comments, responses, rebuttals?
Sure. I believe that, and I did mention that I don't believe the curtain is entirely down. I think in some areas it is. I think they're bringing it back up with AI. We don't know who is behind that. We know some companies are, obviously, but who's writing the engines? How are they being controlled? Why do they have a bias? And why is the bias in one direction? So we've already noticed that from the beginning. So I do believe that they've pulled the curtain down, but they're pulling it back up over AI. And I would, just be real weary there, because there's a lot of jobs that can be taken away from that. A lot of high-paying developer jobs. Obviously, you need somebody to continue to develop the AI and update it and so on. But at that point, they can replace a lot of these programmers out there that have, very valuable jobs. It's pretty scary.
Look, I'm not a big fan of Hollywood, and I'm on the record of saying this for years, since I've ever started doing centerline systems. But I make jokes about Hollywood, but now I'm here in front of it, and I think that's where it all started. Like I have a personal, anathema towards being in front of the camera. It's just my whole background. This would have been completely verboten. You never would have done anything like this, But so, as I'm starting to grow older and I'm warming up and I'm out of that world now, but it's not that hard to get away from. But to my point, I've made fun about Hollywood for a long time, but as you just mentioned, Paul, look, I appreciate a human being. I don't care anything else about them. I appreciate a human being who really can act, because that's part of this human connection. If somebody can act out something that invokes feelings of, whether that's sorrow, anger, joy, pride, whatever it is, that's a pretty awesome thing. And if that gets replaced by AI, well, then kind of bring that over to Blackbeard. And I saw you nod, going into those two different, which direction are we going in as a species? Well, I think AI, if that really does take place, if that sets itself into, some type of permanence, well, then that's just one, in my opinion, that's one step closer towards, evil and a bad outcome, a future of humanity that I'm not really all that keen on being a part of. Blackbeard.
In the words of Robert Plant, yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Oh, yeah. God dang it. I like that.
No, Robert Plant's pretty good. Robert Plant's pretty good. Hey, one last comment on my side that all three of you kind of got me thinking, like whether the curtain's coming down. I just kind of want to postulate to all three of you then. I want to continue that. Why do you think? What is transpiring? And try to give me some specifics, or just, even if you're saying, hey, anecdotally, or I think subjectively, but what is it that's happening? Where have there been success? Because so I guess first and foremost, first off, do you think peeling the curtain back and exposing who's really, pulling the strings, is that a positive thing or is that a negative thing? And if, then based on that, what events transpired that allowed some of the curtain to be pulled back? And then finally, and where do we go from there? Who wants to start with that? But those are my three questions to you guys on kind of the track that we're on right now.
I just have a quick response.
Okay.
I think it's negative because they no longer care. They have the power. They don't care anymore. They don't need to hide.
Yep. Okay. No, actually, so I hate to say it, I was kind of fishing because I personally totally agree with that. I think we've gone to the point, whether we got lucky or we had some victories, I think it's I no longer care. The jig is up. Now let's get on with the game. Redbeard or Blackbeard, who wants to go next?
If you want to take it, Blackbeard, you can.
I just think it's important to try and keep your bearings during this time, because it is a time of difficulty and transition. And whether it's good or whether it's bad, Mark, you pretty much nailed it when you said you're indifferent, because it's just the reality. So it doesn't really matter, because it's not as though we can go back in time and change it. All we can do is what we can do now. And I think maintaining our moorings in our minds, in our hearts, and our spirits, and amongst other people is how we're going to make it through this, if indeed we're going to make it through this. And in this, I think, I think it's gotten to the point where there's a confluence of many different events. One of them is that the monetary system is on its absolute last legs. It basically died in 2008. It's been kept alive through massive theft and fraud for the last, however many years, 12 plus years.
Yeah, 12 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, 15 years. Anyway, and so it's at the point where it's like, the money isn't meaningful as an end when you have infinite money, but it is important as a means. And so knowing that it's going to die, the best thing that you can do is decide when and how it dies and what takes its place. And I think that's what we're going through right now in terms of transition on that level. And so, yeah.
That's a damn good point, because go back to the very beginning of this. We're talking about all these alternative energies and alternative engines and these the sources of science that really would benefit humanity. So to what you just said, Blackbeard, like, okay, now I'm picking and choosing how and when it dies. So if I did have some of this stuff, if I did steal some of Tesla's secrets, or I've got this water engine, or I've got, 0 point energy, whatever it is. Okay. Well, so when do you want that to be released? Well, you might, so I'm going to bring this over to Redbeard, but you might want to say, well, there's too many people and we're not, well, I'm just throwing this out there. Well, then I would be saying, well, then if we had that technology, then why aren't we looking at space exploration? And I'm not saying that the Earth is flat and we didn't land on the moon, but it does beg the question, like, because you'd be like, well, if I have this energy, if I can do this, then think of all the other things I can do. And if I really think the world is overpopulated, which it's not even close to being overpopulated, but I could start pushing people off into the cosmos and spread the human race. Unless your ideology says, no, we shouldn't spread, or what. But you see, I'm just throwing out, there's some options on how maybe the other side is really thinking about that. But I'm only throwing out there to Blackbeard's point. Then what is it? Then is this the time that they're looking at? Okay, now we're getting ready to kill the old system so we can bring about some type of change that implements a new system, and then I can manipulate some things while I still have the means, the money, while that monetary system still is in existence. And then I can actually further foster my ultimate goals, which is, again, anything from as crazy as there's 10 people left on the planet to we're spreading our seed out through the solar system and the galaxy, or we're all drinking Kool-Aid, and because that's going to get us enlightenment, and and we'll become celestial beings or something at that point. That was a little bit of a reference for anybody who's watching, listening to like doomsday cults, and people like, I'm talking like James Jones type of Kool-Aid, not the really cool, hey, Kool-Aid, kind of Kool-Aid. So, all right, Redbeard, what do you got there on that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go mildly white pilled on this. And for me, Mark, here's how I look at it: is to me it's a net positive, and I'll explain why it's a net positive. And it's a net positive, and actually, the fact that it involves kind of what Paul said in, well, now they have nothing to hide, that everything's out there. And it's like, like where that's a negative to some degree, that's also a positive for us, because now we can identify and recognize, like, okay, like we need to be honest with ourselves. This is taking place. And to Blackbeard's point, like, change is not only coming, but it will be here whether we like it or not.
Now, change is always inevitable.
Yeah. And so my point on this is, and Mark, I've said this probably, I'm going to use your favorite phrase that I always bring up ad nauseum, which is, look, if you don't have skills, acquire skills. If you don't know people in your community, get to know people in your community. If you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are, put yourself in a position to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Grow yourself to be an asset, teach yourself or learn how to do certain things that you're not comfortable doing. Network, get to know people. And not only that though, but be honest with yourself, be honest with things that are going on in your life. Find a sense of compassion towards your fellow man, where it is deserved, and be a good person. Because look, in the end of the day, if we're able to cultivate ourselves as individuals, we in doing that, we will stave off a lot of the negatives that will come. And it doesn't mean it won't be turbulent. It doesn't mean it won't hurt, because it very much will bring pain. My point is, if we can make ourselves strong while we're in these times before it gets here, then we have a better chance of surviving what's coming, as well as helping ensure the survival of people around us, than if we sit sedentary, we do nothing, we don't prepare our minds, our bodies, our spirits, and acquire a sense of self and some skills. Like, to me, I have said this for a long time, Mark, right? Like, get out there, get good at something, learn how to do something, because that's where your inherent value is going to come from. It's already been said, the monetary system, for lack of a better way of saying it, is screwed, right? Like, there's going to be a change. So you need to find another sense or another type of currency, if you will, that you can do that. And I think we're going to come back to the currency of skills. If you don't have skills, your value's not going to be there. If you have skills, you're going to be able to contribute. And especially if we get into this point to where we have these world orders that come into place, we have a credit system. If there's an underground to be had, you better believe those skills are going to get you through if you fall into the cracks of the underground, which can be very prosperous. Look,
I
there's
just
a lot
want to
of
slow you
hope
down
here.
because we're even assuming that there will be an underground. Like, I don't even want to assume what that looks like, because again, we don't know. Back, hey, like we like to say, go back to our previous episodes on Carver and your decision making process about what do you think is going to happen, the probability of that event, and then the consequences of that event.
Wherever Jeremy, you end up.
Yeah, well, and then now I kind of want to bring this over to Paul and Blackbeard. It's like, okay, so we've kind of already danced around it a little bit. The curtain's been pulled back a little bit, but everybody, it seems, I don't want to speak for anyone, but it seems the consensus is we kind of are getting a little bit of a glimpse, and whoever's back there just doesn't give a shit. So to me, right, is that kind of fair, everybody? Just that first thing, is that kind of it? Whoever's pulling the strings, whomever or whatever group or consortium or cult or alien beings or whatever the F it is, whatever that thing is, it doesn't care. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so then my next question is, so if that whatever that is doesn't care, well then to me that means we're going to go in one very as much as that can be controlled, right? If that other thing no longer cares, I guess maybe another analogy would be like, think of a cornered animal. You always, cornered animals always fight, the toughest, Well, this isn't a cornered animal. This is an animal. It's like, okay, so you peek behind the curtain. I feel, and I don't care if you see me back here, and I'm starting to just say it out loud, because to me that implies I'm emboldened, I'm confident, or I'm comfortable that there's nothing you're going to do about it. You kind of see where I'm going with this, fellas. Like, so what does that mean for us? And Jeremy, your point made me think about that. Yeah. So you've got to have skills. You got to have, things that are going to translate into a currency. That currency could be your skill set. It could be a language, whatever it is, Paul, Blackbeard, you kind of see where I'm pushing that. So what does that mean? Because that could mean some pretty horrific things when you kind of think about it as possible outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm absolutely preparing to barter. I mean, and if assuming my skill set that is at least aware in the podcast, my other skills, whatever, I can do other things around the house and do that kind of junk. But when it comes to computers, if the power's out and everything's done, that skill set's gone. I have to have something else to do and provide for someone else. And I do believe, I agree with Redbeard that, I am white-pilled, man. We just need to unite as a people peacefully get together with your neighbors, just have a plan. Know that, you know, that what I heard recently, I think it was on Jack's, one of Jack's videos, where he said that the entire pork industry is owned by China. I mean, if that is true,
Yeah.
I hope that's not true because I love bacon, but I might have to have myself some pig. So you might need to do more, but get it started, you know. And again, I just want to be alone and have a group that we can work together with, and then we need to do that. Absolutely.
Blackbeard, your thoughts?
As we have developed the digital infrastructure of the world and expanded its borders, the borders of our own world have shrunk to the point where most of us live in complete digital isolated ghettos. We don't know our neighbors. We don't, everybody is lonely. They're incapable of unifying. And so this is what this can be on the white-pilled side, on the positive side, in my view, is this is an opportunity to rediscover what really matters about the human experience.
Yes, 100%.
And if you look at, there's something I was just going to say.
Well, hey, while you're gathering your thoughts, I'm just going to because it's not a dichotomy between what, you know, you just stated and what, you know, Paul and Redbeard kind of stated. But to me, I mean, I'm just throwing my hat in the ring or 2 cents. I think that is going to be the us versus them that you're going to see. You've got a growing number of people who are waking up and they're starting to realize the importance of faith and family and friends and nature and these things that used to really everybody used to value. To you know, Blackbeard, you know, even going back to what you were talking about before, you know, we've got this that's not humanistic. It's the you know, it's the I have no problem getting implants in my hands. I have no problem having my retina scanned. You know, look what Musk and other companies are trying to do. Like, you know, the brain AI. Like, you know, we've got this group of people who want to be these. You know, what is it? Transcendentalists. What is it again for that side?
Transhumanists.
Yeah, transhumanists. So you've got this transhumanist side that, for whatever reason, wants to embrace that. I guess maybe, honestly, I feel sorry for those people. And I'm kind of going a little bit off on a tangent, but it'll come back in because I think they've lost their souls. I think they've lost their sense of identity and who they really are. They want to be so desperately half machine, or, you know, I almost wonder if some of them think they're going to be like, you know, Terminators or any of the things that they've seen in movies and media. Like, you know, like, I don't know. So, because that's not human to me, you know, that's not right. That goes against every fiber of my being. It's like, yeah, I'll never be able to beat Mike Tyson in a boxing match. I don't care. I can appreciate everything to this day Mike Tyson is still talking about. That's almost become one of my new weird little things. Yeah. Mike Tyson has really, you know, when he's aged and he's wise and he was a great fucking, excuse me, but he was a great athlete at what he was doing. And there's so many other people in so many other arenas who bring all of those things together for their specific, whether it's, you know, an occupation, whether it's an endeavor, whether it's, you know, literature or philosophy or whatever, you know, or the ability to be the best bocce ball player in, you know, the state of Texas, whatever. That's awesome. That's what makes us great. That individuality, going back to Redbeard. So kind of Redbeard and Paul, I'm not trying to make a camp here. I'm hearing you guys kind of talk about that is the thing that we need to rely on it, because it'll either be the thing that helps us with their survival, or it'll be the thing that helps, you know, I guess that side of the coin possibly win the fight in the long run. And I'm not saying Blackbeard was saying, you know, like, embrace technology, become a Borg. I'm not saying that at all, but I do see those two things happening. But I think the side that wants it to go in the direction of the transhumanism, whoever's behind the scenes, and this is where I was going, this is going back to the question, they no longer care if they're being seen and their evil's being exposed. And therefore, how does that not equal or equate to impending doom? Because if you don't care, well, you know, somebody's going to resist you. You either have the confidence of like, yeah, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it, and I'm going to like just steamroll through you guys, or it's bring it on. You know, see where I'm kind of going, fellas? Yeah, so, Blackbeard's nodding. Let's come to Blackbeard first. Well, actually, Redbeard, I saw you chomping. Let's go to you. All right.
Well, it's just real quick, because in Blackbeard, you seem like somebody who may have seen this movie. And Mark, you're a movie guy too, and Paul, I don't know how many movies you watch, but have you guys ever seen this movie? It's called Gamer. It's a movie with Gerard Butler. It came out years ago, and I don't remember what the platform was on it, but Gamer exists in this world to where you can it has like that AI component, but here's the thing is it allows people to go into this virtual world, except this virtual world you're actually controlling other human beings. And I think it was something called like humanity or society or something like that. But you're talking about transhumanism, and it's like if they box this up and they put a nice little bow on it, and you can live not just vicariously through somebody else, but literally, like if you're implanted with something, and now you have a system to where you can go and like control somebody else just by linking into a neural link or whatever, and you can do this. I mean, think of the crazy, and pardon my French, but think of the crazy shit that could go on, and it supplants or like transplants rather this sense of humanity and this sense of self for this synthetic reality that still ruins somebody else's lives. It's just not ruining your life. So I don't know if you all have seen that movie, Gamer, but it's trippy because when I was sitting there listening to what Blackbeard had to say, that's the first thing that came to mind. And I was like, dude, like that's so freaking weird. It skeeves me out just thinking about it, because look, Mark, if you get an implant and it's something that's, wired to the net, who's to say that somebody can't, depending on how they get into it, who's to say they can control your actions? Who's to say they can't put you to do something? I mean,
just saying, and just slow it down. I mean, let's get it over to Blackbeard, but just before you go too far, it's already happening with AI.
Yeah.
Look at all the cases where we're finding lawyers and like things that are official, where it's like it's all fake and it was like an AI, and like and no one's getting the message. Like, dude, the AI just made all that shit up, and that's what got you in trouble. Like, so right then and there, everybody should be like, no, stop on this stuff. Whether the AI did it intentionally or the AI isn't that good. It's irrelevant. At the end of the day, that the net result was negative.
Let's
come to Blackbeard, because I can see him. I know he's patiently waiting. Blackbeard, okay, you good?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to go back to the first question that you raised a couple of times, which is, what does that imply if they don't care? So one thing, and this is on a very natural level, I think it goes deeper than this, but statistically, it's something like 1% to 5%. I may be wrong on that, but I know it's extremely small proportion of the population are psychopaths. They have anti-personality disorder.
It's about 1%. Yeah, it's about 1%.
And there was a book written on that called Snakes in Suits that talks about how the representation of that percentage is so much larger per capita within major corporations at the higher you go up the chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what we have created is a system where a man's value is determined by economic measures. And what does that mean? That means that if they create a tech, right now they were talking about replacing the low end, like fast food workers and things like that. But that's because that's the low hanging fruit, and that's easier to automate. But corporations have a larger incentive to eliminate the positions within their structure that are more expensive. And so that's where the AI comes in to take over the white collar, information based kind of work. And so the question then becomes, so what if you're blue collar and you can't provide value anymore because robots are doing it, and you're white collar and digital robots are providing that value, then what value do you have in a system that gauges your value by purely economic means? And I think that's part of the reason that you have the whole push for, well, there's too many people. What they're really saying is that we don't need you anymore. We were using you, and now you're not useful anymore. And insofar and as long as you were useful, then you're here. But
I hate to say this, I don't even like where you just went with that, because it just made me feel so horrible. Because and when we kind of were talking, a couple of days ago about having this as the topic, it came into not just even the who's behind the corner, but the moral and philosophical argument here. And Stephen, you just kind of, Blackbeard, you just kind of kicked me in the jimmy, because I was talking to an old Army buddy about the VA yesterday, and what you just said. Think about that, everybody. Everybody watching, like, how many people in the union or the VA or whatever your job is, your occupation, who, to Stephen's point, it's easier just to get rid of these people. I'm an individual. I get my own opinion, and I'm going to say this. We'll do this a different podcast. I'm almost 100%, sold on the fact that the VA doesn't give a shit about a single fucking veteran in the VA system. The whole thing is to, work with big pharma, medicate them, don't actually identify and fix the actual physical ailment. And if they die, who cares? Because, to Blackbeard's point, it's too expensive to continue paying for their pensions. And, that's just money I don't have to pay anymore, So that just, I know I just kind of took us in a different direction, and I'll bring it back on track with Paul, but boy, that just kicked me right in that was like a punch to the stomach right there, man. I mean, because it's so true. I agree with that on such a personal level, right? So, Paul, let's come back over to you. Or Blackbeard, I'm sorry, because I kind of interrupted, and you did kind of phase in and out there for a second. So maybe you went back behind the curtain, and then you phased back in front of the curtain. I'm not sure what happened there, but it was kind of weird. But do you got a concluding or a finishing comment on that? Because I don't know if I stole your thunder or if it was the phasing. But then I want to come to Paul and get his thoughts on that too. Going back to the original set of questions.
I would just say that with the more power that you have, that's reinforced by the group think of your social peers, it's very easy to get high on your own supply and get filled with hubris and overestimate your own capacities. And so even though we're seeing, somewhat impressive things right now, there's still a lot of infrastructure that has to be maintained. There's still a distance to go. And I would just say that, that does require a certain measure of competency. And I don't think it's written in stone that just because they want something that they're going to get it, at least not in the time frame or in the way that they perhaps desire.
So there's still hope.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay. Paul, going back to that kind of, if then this, set of questions, your thoughts, sir.
Yeah, I have 3 responses to previous statements. So back to Redbeard, when you brought up implants, what happens when there's a vulnerability in those? How often do you, what evil person, hacker type person, can then access your implant? So that's spooky. And it doesn't even have to be the person that put the implant in there that wants the information from it. It could be someone there. The second thing is, I did mention about, having a local tribe type thing, but, if the powers that be, and I'm not saying it's our government, right? I'm just saying if the powers that be, that the people behind the curtain want to maintain their power, and we decide we don't care about you, we're going to do this on our own. Don't you think they could release something, maybe a virus that would kill off all our livestock, even us? So that's another thought there. So yes, it's a good idea, and I'm trying to just make sure I can go that route. But in the end, it might just be for nothing, because they could just release something and kill us all. The last thing, automation and robots. I mean, this has been noticeable for years. You can't walk into a store where there isn't one cashier. Everything is checked by yourself. They have they have cameras all over you, so it's not like you're going to get away with anything. Not that I would, but somebody might try. If you go into a restaurant, a fast food restaurant, let's say, there's usually self-checkout kiosks, and they just have the people making the food. I don't eat that type of food anymore, but I've seen it, and it's just really, they're taking jobs away through this. So technology is killing jobs, which is then, it progresses.
Okay, so hang on. So just to add to that, then, so that, because your last comments go into the questions, if they're emboldened, they don't care anymore, then what's the outcome? Because then they're not hiding it. And you just said they're taking away jobs. Well, so then what happens if there's a population and there's just no jobs for everybody? So to me, it would seem, and I'm throwing this back to you, Paul, if there's too many, if we don't need that many people, well, then is it not fair to say that they're saying, well, we just don't need that many people, and therefore we should just kill some of these people off because we can do some of this stuff with technology? So again, if it's true and they're wittingly and knowingly and willing to let the curtain come back a little bit, and that's going to expose them, but they don't care. So again, I think what you just said about jobs disappearing, by the use of just computers, technology, not even AI. Well, then where do these other people go for jobs? And then, at some point, then does that not comport with that there's just too many people anyway?
Well, I would say that, and this is only a half joke. Hollywood usually gets it right ahead of time. I think we all live on batteries, just like in the Matrix. They will have a use for us at some point, and that may seem a little bit crazy, but if we're worthless as doing a job, they can at least utilize our energy as a person.
Yeah.
Again, half joke there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not serious, but where are we going with this?
Well, to me, I think where I was going with that, because we already see it, and so I'm not making this up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen these stories, but they just claim to have spread they claim to have given a human being a vaccine via mosquitoes. So they're using a biologic, they're infecting these mosquitoes with these, antibodies, quote unquote, and then when the human being gets bit by this biologic, this mosquito, there's a transference there. There's more reports talking about, like whether you didn't get, the jab or not, you still are getting mRNAs through, shedding, and there's
more beef.
Yeah, and then there's the beef stuff. Exactly. And if YouTube bans us for this, YouTube can fuck off, because that's we're not speculating. These are actual freaking articles.
Out there.
Yeah. So Paul, to your point, okay, maybe they can find a way to make us into batteries, but maybe they'll just find ways to just either eradicate you or find some other use to you. And I kind of want to bring that over to Blackbeard. And I know he's got to bounce pretty soon, and we're kind of getting close to wrapping up. So I kind of want to give Blackbeard some, Blackbeard and Paul, some closing thoughts. And then Redbeard, you've just been kind of there. We haven't really given you as much time tonight. I apologize. But then we'll come over to Redbeard for final comments and the outro. So Blackbeard, even if you don't want to respond to what I just said, I think that's where I'd like you and Paul to go. But if you want to go in a different direction, take it away for a little bit, sir.
Well, I would just say that, I'm of the opinion that the consumer level of technological application is not the cutting edge for a number of reasons. Number one, the cutting edge is always going to be the most expensive. And number two, if you're one of the organizations that is funding the development of that technology, it is against your interest to release it to the public until it's reached such a stage that you're already quite far beyond it, so that you can maintain the asymmetry of information advantage that's conferred on you by having superior technology. I mean, look at the history of the world, right? When
going back to our previous podcast, sorry to interrupt you, but the quote unquote UFO question might be Boeing or Lockheed or somebody else having advanced technology, and they don't want anybody else to know about it until they've expended and made as much money off of fossil fuels as they possibly can. I mean, that's a possibility, right?
It's certainly a possibility, and maybe even a probability. ARPA was developed by the government, and it's interesting because one of the individuals responsible for its creation was a man named Jacques Vallée that I referenced in the previous podcast, who's also a very famous ufologist. And it wasn't until years later, decades later, really, that we started accessing the internet ourselves. And so you always have to wonder, what's being released. In my opinion, it's like, oh, this is the newest so-and-so. Well, what that tells me is that whatever is happening in the really expensive, privately funded projects is quite a bit more advanced, probably. And
can I throw in a cheesy kind of current social or movie reference? I think I've said this in a podcast before, but you just nailed it right there, and it just totally made me think of it. So there's a new Batman movie. It's not new. It's been a couple years now. And I think at a minimum, Redbeard and I have talked about this over the phone. Yeah. But you look at that movie and it goes right to, you just said, Blackbeard, like the things that you and I already have, dude, that's already old news. Not old news, but old news. And so Batman, and it's the guy who from the vampire movies who plays Batman. And I thought I would hate it, and I actually love it. But he is, he's Bruce Wayne. He's a multi-millionaire, billionaire type of guy. He's using the technology that, that companies are, and he's again, he's obviously financing this stuff. It's the stuff that we're not seeing right now. And what I liked about that movie is there's this really, and the reason I'm saying this, Blackbeard, because to your point, there's this real believable level of like, dude, that actual technology could exist right now.
Yeah.
We don't see it, but that's something that, maybe, again, Gates or Musk or, whomever else, Jobs, they're actually playing with that right now. And we're just the public not seeing it. So I think that's to your point, Blackbeard. I think that's 100% correct. And what we, the plebes, are getting, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what's actually probably already in existence or near completion right now. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, I mean, it's just, look at nobody's better than their incentives, right? So a lot of this is just, unfortunately, common sense isn't very common, right? But just look at the incentivization structure, if I have technology that's superior to yours, that confers an advantage on my survival over you. And it gives me power over you. And so why would I voluntarily relinquish that just because I love you, because you're my economic slave? I'm not trying to be real negative, but it's just like, it's so it's,
I didn't know you were going to say economic slave. I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that I love you thing, but it was still great all the same.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but it goes back to the idea that our value is determined by the economic production. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but I'm saying it does matter. And that's kind of what the problem becomes. And so, if they're getting ready to like beta test, like, well, we think we have a chip ready to maybe, put in here. It's like, check out a guy named Hugo de Garis. He wrote I don't know if it was a book or a paper, I can't recall, but it's called The Art-elect War. Now, this may all be like fantasy, like futuristic techno-utopian dreams, just like we were to have flying cars and that never happened. And, everybody's going to live like the Jetsons or like a Star Trek utopian world. And that's never, the word utopia means no place, incidentally. So, no, it's, that's what I'm saying. It's not a done deal, but I do think that they have technology because they have to, because they would be fools. And I just don't see how you acquire power and maintain power by being a fool. You might be evil. You might be surrounded by incompetent yes men and lackeys who you put to the public face to do your bidding for you. But it doesn't make any sense that you'd be in a position like that from a position of being like a foolish person, to me.
Well, I think just a modern example or a current example is, what is Trump? Is he's either an incompetent boob or he's like a mastermind? To your point, he didn't get to where he was by being what, he's often painted out to be. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there for an example. Whether you like Trump or not, you can't sit there and say he's an idiot. And then how did he get to that position? That just doesn't make any sense. Logic doesn't hold true to that. Paul, what do you got for us here, sir? Any response direct to Blackbeard, or you want to go in a slightly different direction?
I just want to say that there's another option. He could be a childish genius, right?
Sure.
So,
but going to Blackbeard's comments, it might sound science fiction, but there's been plenty of science fiction books and movies in which the incredibly smart entity, whether it's a human or a robotic, computer, is childish in nature, and that results in something horrible happening in the course of the storyline. So I no, that's a fair statement to make, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that was just an option out there. I'm not saying I believe that, but I think it's a realistic possibility. But those, whether they're behind the curtain or in front of the curtain now, or the curtain's gone, people in those positions are willing to wait 100 plus years to accomplish their goals. They don't care. Why? Well, because, in that neck of the woods, or not neck of the woods, but that society, bartenders and children that believe in a cause can become millionaires within a couple of years. And if that's true, you're taken care of for the rest of your life. You push that agenda, you're rich, you're done. The next generation takes over. So, yeah, they don't care. But there is a path for every one of them. And that is absolutely what's going on, in my opinion.
To bring this, I guess maybe one last question, or bring it over to Redbeard. But Paul, I think you nailed it. Look what's going on. I didn't think about it quite that way, but look at how many politicians on both sides of the aisle are absolutely corrupt. Mm-hmm. It's what you just said. They're not playing any I'm on this side or on that side. They're playing the incredibly evil, it's not individualistic, from a moral, like a morality or a freedom perspective. It's the selfish, I just want to think about it. For anyone watching, would you be okay with $2 million? You're not going to turn $2 million down, but what Paul's saying is like, these are people who are, probably like, oh, I do this and I do that. And I go from being a bartender and now I'm worth like, $25 million. I don't care because, I don't care what happens next. I got mine and I'm just going to keep it going because my children, instead of having 25, might have 50 or 75. I know some people call that useful idiots, but I mean, I think that goes to what you said right there, Paul. I think that's where my brain went when you said it that way. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that it would be a tough decision, but I could not do that. I could never do that. And, some people might say, well, why, you have this disagreement here and there. Why don't you run for office? Well, number one, I have no shot anyway. Okay, forget that. But I couldn't do what they do. I see, over the years, those that I even trusted and believed in turned out to be corrupt. And not all of them are, of course, but a lot of them are. And I like you had me fooled. I, campaigned for you. I contributed to you. And then, you sell my information to people that on both sides of the aisle. Now, I'm independent, but we'll leave it at that. But so maybe that's why they did that. I don't know, but particular candidates, it's just disgusting. They have no morals, and you just said that, Mark, earlier. You're not born with them, and they definitely lost them once they got put into office.
Or they just learn a completely different set of values and morals, through the associations in their life as they're moving up into that political office trajectory, right? Plain and simple. Blackbeard, my good man, what pearls, what nuggets, what boulders of wisdom do you got for us on the way out here, sir?
I would say that we have to think about our relationship to technology and what it means. People say technology is neither good nor bad, but depending on how you use it, I personally don't subscribe to that. I think some of it is fundamentally transformative in a way that's detrimental to human flourishing. And I say that at the with the knowledge of the hypocrisy of me talking to you over the internet, recorded by technology. It's with earbuds, in my ears. I get it. It's kind of where we are. And I think we need to reconnect with the things that are organic and spiritual in the world, because I think that ultimately that's a higher truth. It's a closer understanding of our own identity in a time when identity is directly under attack, so that you can become a plastic person who's infinitely moldable to whatever the people who are able to do the molding, whatever they desire that to be. And ultimately, I hope that the person that is molding you is closer to yourself than to somebody else. But that's a lonely road, and it's a difficult road to walk, and you will be misunderstood. And I would just say count the cost always, because if you choose to go along with the flow, unquestioningly, if you choose the easy path, you will pay a price for that. You will. And if you choose the opposite, you will also pay a price for that. There is no option to not pay a price. The only question is, which price will you pay?
Boom. Yep. Mic drop. Redbeard, we got Paul on, we got Blackbeard. Yep. I know both of these gentlemen have to bounce here in a couple minutes. I think that's a great place to take us out. You want to add your own pearls and boulders and nuggets and comments, and then take us on out here tonight?
So I actually have something pre-set up, and I'm going to read something to you guys, and then I'll tell you what it pertains to, because I had brought it up earlier. In 2034, computer programmer Ken Castle invents self-replicating nanites that replace brain tissue and allow humans to control other humans' actions and see through their eyes. The first application of Castle's naniX technology is a virtual community life simulation game, Society, which allows gamers to manipulate live actors as their avatars. Society becomes a worldwide sensation, making Castle the richest man in the world. He then creates Slayers, a first-person shooter where the characters are death row prisoners using real weapons in specially created arenas. Unlike society actors, Slayer's participants are not paid. Instead, they volunteer in exchange for the promise that any Slayer who survives 30 matches will earn his freedom. John Cable Tillman is the crowd's favorite, having survived a record 27 matches since no inmate before him has managed to last more than 10. He is exclusively controlled by Simon, a 17-year-old superstar gamer from a wealthy family. An activist organization called The Humans hacks a talk show interview with Castle and claims that his technology will one day be used to control people against their will. The Humans also disrupt society play, but Castle sees both these actions as trivial. However, Castle feels threatened by Cable's winning streak, introduces a new inmate into Slayer's Hackman, specifically to kill Cable. Unknown to anyone else, Hackman will not be controlled by a player and thus not handicapped by the ping that causes a small but dangerous delay between the player's command and the Slayer's action. We are talking about
that movie.
Yeah. We're and that's what I'm getting at is like it seems like it's far out there, but look, like realistically, if these people behind the curtain are ahead technologically, who's to say that that's not a potentiality? Like if they're already implanting stuff, people really don't think that they couldn't start replacing brain matter or tissue or subverting a neural system or whatever the case is. Like, dude, have anybody who's been aware of medical advances has seen this type of thing. They've studied brain waves. They've gained a far better understanding of the nervous system and all of these different things. You don't think that something like that isn't possible? And I would say that that's bollocks.
It's just to kind of, because I know our guests got to go, so we'll use that. But you raise a great point. And if somebody right now might say, Jeremy's just reaching, that's fantasy world. Again, see our previous comments. They're already doing it. They're trying to manipulate these things through shedding, through mosquitoes, through beef.
It should be just a movie,
Jeremy, you know, Redbeard, you're not off. I mean, again, they're not hiding. And I think Paul was the first one who brought it up. They're not hiding it anymore. Hey, yeah, you saw behind the curtain. Okay. There was this another, it wasn't Harari. It was a different guy who was intentionally coming out and talking about how they need to use an epidemic, another pandemic, CBDC, so they can actually then, therefore, that's the only way they're going to affect climate change is by by infecting people, creating a situation, then being able to control their money. So they're not lying about it. And so if they're already doing that, even though that might be from a movie and it seems science fiction, they're already talking about brain implants. They're already doing the little orb thing. And they're already saying that's exactly what they want to do.
It's closer than I think most people realize. Like I wish it was more of one of those things to where we could, you know, be like, oh, that's science fiction. Like that would be great. But the reality of it is we're getting there. So I'm going to leave it on that.
Well, hey, and just before you just everybody who's still here with us, Dan, seriously, rewind it. Go all the way back to Paul and Blackbeard and then these final comments. Like that is this question you should be asking yourself. That is a very potentially scary, dystopian, not distant future. And whatever's going on, is it possible that the things that are taking place, that the man behind the curtain is moving the pieces around on the board, regardless of how much money it costs? You know, again, see Blackbeard's previous comments. In order to set up a situation in which these conditions might be the outcomes, it kind of seems like that might be possible. So just ponder that stuff, people, because this isn't black pill doom porn, you know, or whatever the hell that term is, you know, fear porn. It's not my words. It's not Redbeard's. It's not Paul's. It's not Blackbeard's. It's our comments about the things that they're saying and the cards they're already showing you that they have in their hand. So, Redbeard. And before you go, seriously, Paul and Blackbeard, I know you guys got a bounce. We're wrapping up.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you guys so very much. As always, awesome having you guys over here on Mission Critical Podcast.
Good stuff, guys. Your
consolation prize tonight is our everlasting love and honor and respect.
I receive it. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on.
You're damn right.
All right, fellas, I'm going to take us out here. On that note, thank you to everybody that's watching, that's been bearing with us and dealing with some of the shenanigans, but also hopefully, you find the conversation somewhat interesting and perhaps comical at times, but it's we try to have an underlying like real conversation here, and so with that being said, thank you for your patronage and stopping by and watching this. And on that note, look, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there's good people that are willing to support and defend it. And that means you, and like Mark said, you are the resistance. So on that note, Mark, that's all I got, buddy.
All right, everybody. Thanks to our guests, Paul and Blackbeard. We'll see you guys again next week. Redbeard, your outros are always awesome, dude. Thank you very much. I'm hitting end record. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Be good. Woo!
Doodles.